Before we begin, please note that this video contains spoilers for multiple Cosmere books. That includes the Stormlight Archive, Mistborn, Secret History, Tress of the Emerald Sea, and references to world building from Arcanum Unbounded and public comments from the author. If you're not caught up and want to avoid spoilers, consider pausing here and coming back later. This video explores a theory about the Iriali, a people who appear briefly in the Cosmere, but carry a deep and mysterious philosophy. According to their beliefs, they follow something called the Long Trail, a migration across 7 different lands, intended to help them eventually become one again. The trail isn't just cultural or symbolic. It might reflect a deeper realmatic journey, a path through worlds where Investiture behaves differently or shows signs of disruption, transformation, or self-sustaining behavior. We know from the Stormlight Archive that Roshar was the 4th land. This video builds on that to propose a logical sequence for all 7 based on canonical lore and realmatic patterns. It's speculative, of course, but grounded in what we know about the Cosmere and Investiture. Yolan is the original world in the Cosmere and the home of Adenalcium before the Shattering. It's the setting of the Lyre of Partenil and Dragonsteel, though neither has been published yet, and the details we know mostly come from public interviews and references across the Cosmere. Yolan is also the place where the Shattering of Adenalcium occurred. 16 individuals, including known figures like Hoyd and Bavadine, took part in the event and subsequently became vessels of the Shards. Since the Iriali believe they were once part of the greater One, and that they are now separated fragments following a trail back toward that state, it makes sense to begin on Yolan. If any world represents a state of original, unbroken power, this would be it. Today, Yolan is inaccessible to most world hoppers. We don't know how many beings still live there, or what the Shattering did to the world itself. If the Iriali are following a realmatic path through different expressions of Investiture, then Yolan fits as the first step, because it represents the state of the Cosmere before fragmentation. This might be the moment when the trail became necessary, when something whole was shattered, and pieces scattered across the stars. If the Iriali were part of that original wholeness, or were present in some form on Yolan, then their departure could mark the start of their mission, to track how Investiture behaves after division, and perhaps to learn something from the pieces. Their belief in becoming one again isn't just about metaphysics. It may reflect an intentional attempt to understand what was lost, and the best place to begin that process is the world that came before the Shards. Sel is a world dominated by 2 shards, devotion and dominion, or rather it was. Both were killed by odium, and their investiture was left unclaimed. Instead of being picked up by a new vessel, the power of devotion and dominion pooled in the cognitive realm, forming a chaotic, storm-like mass known as the Door. Magic on Sel is defined by its interaction with the Door, but unlike other systems in the Cosmere, it's geographically locked. Each form of magic, like Aeon Door, in Arleon or forgery in Nippon only works within a defined region. That's because the door is so unstable that it can only be accessed through very specific patterns, often drawn in the air or etched into physical objects. This makes magic on Sel powerful, but also dangerous and restrictive. The lack of a shard to guide or structure the power leaves the door raw, reactive, and highly conditional. If the Iriali are following a trail through Investiture systems, then Sel would likely have been their first encounter with the power after the Shattering. Unlike Yolan, where power was still whole, or at least structured, Sel shows what happens when Investiture is left behind without a vessel to shape it. The door isn't just chaotic, it's a direct result of two shards being splintered and the leftover power trying to push through into the physical realm without direction. Its investiture is in its most turbulent form, accessible only through strict symbolic languages and limited by geography. This would have given the Iriali a case study in what happens to power after death, and when divine force remains, but purpose and unity are gone. For a people trying to understand the consequences of fragmentation, Sel would be an essential stop. It demonstrates that investiture, when unmoored from a conscious shard, becomes difficult to use and even harder to direct, an important lesson early in the trail. Threnody is a world known more for what it lacks than what it offers. There's no functional magic system, no living shard, no active perpendicularity. What it does have is danger, spiritual, realmatic, and deeply unsettling. Long ago, Ambition was wounded by Odium near Threnody, and although she died elsewhere, the effects of that attack are still visible on the planet. The most prominent feature of Threnody is the presence of shades, cognitive shadows of the dead who linger unnaturally. These shades are bound by strange rules. No flame, no bloodshed, no running. Breaking these rules invites attack. There is also something referred only to as the evil, a mysterious force that drove the population away from one continent entirely. Its nature is unclear, but is associated with spiritual or cognitive corruption. While there are no known shards currently active on Threnody, the lingering effects of Ambition's injury and the haunting persistence of the shades make it a world defined by spiritual instability and unbalanced investiture. After witnessing structured chaos on Sel, the Iriali may have come to Threnody to explore what happens when investiture doesn't structure itself at all. The shades represent a breakdown of normal realmatic processes. Instead of souls passing on, they linger, twisted, half-aware, and dangerous. This suggests that whatever trauma Ambition's wound inflicted on the local spiritual realm has disrupted the normal flow of death and rebirth. In contrast to Sel, where power exists without a mind, Threnody shows us what happens when power interacts with death and refuses to let go. The Iriali may have studied this to understand another axis of fragmentation, not just unbound investiture, but disrupted transition between realms. A shard wounded but not fully splintered, a people trapped between life and death, a land haunted by consequence, not intention. Threnody may have demonstrated to the Iriali that not all fragmentation is visible as chaos. Sometimes it lingers in systems that should no longer be functional, sustained only by trauma. Roshar is the only world explicitly confirmed to be part of the Iriali's long trail. In the Stormlight archive, we're told that Roshar is the fourth land and that the Iriali left shortly before the Night of Sorrows. Roshar is investiture rich in ways that make it unique across the Cosmere. It is shaped by the influence of three shards: Honor, now splintered, Cultivation, still active, and Odium, who was trapped in the system and has since escaped. Investiture manifests visibly on Roshar through phenomena like Stormlight, Spren, and the Nahel Bond, which allows for surge binding, a powerful magical system based on oaths and ideals. Many of the planet's systems, like High Storms and ancient city patterns, seem to predate the arrival of the Shards, possibly remnants of an even older investiture ecology. We also know that when the Iriali left, it was Kuchasesh, a massive cognitive spren, who warned them that it was time to go. They exited through cultivation's perpendicularity, returning once more to the cognitive realm to continue their journey. After visiting Sel and Threnody, two worlds defined by spiritual damage and investiture instability, Roshar would have stood out as a system where power is structured, layered, and accessible. Spren are fragments of shards that interact consciously with people. Stormlight flows freely and can be held, transferred, and consumed. And the magic systems of Roshar show consistent interaction across all three realms: physical, cognitive, and spiritual. The Iriali may have come here to study how investiture behaves when it is actively maintained by vessels, even in imperfect circumstances. Honor's splintering, cultivation's subtle influence, and Odium's pressure would have offered insight into how divine power competes, overlaps, or endures. If the trail is about understanding fragmentation, Roshar may have taught them how investiture behaves not when it is broken or wild, but when it is deliberately structured, both naturally and artificially. Their decision to leave could indicate that the phase of learning from structured investiture had concluded, and that it was time to study something different once again. Scadrial is the only planet in the Cosmere known to be created entirely by shards. Preservation and ruin crafted it from scratch, shaping its terrain, life, and human population. The magic systems on Scadrial reflect the duality of its creators: Allomancy, which draws power from consuming metal; Feruchemy, which stores physical or spiritual traits for later use; and Hemalurgy, which transfers investiture by force through the violent act of spiking. Later, these two shards were taken up by Sazed, forming the combined shard of Harmony. Harmony now oversees Scadrial, but it is a tenuous balance. The shard embodies conflicting intents and must actively manage their opposition. Scadrial is also a world that has advanced rapidly, from pre-industrial society to spaceflight in just a few generations. Its spiritual and technological evolution are unfolding simultaneously. If the Iriali are tracking how investiture functions across different types of fragmentation, Scadrial represents something new, not just fractured power, but recombined power. Harmony represents an attempt to unify opposing shards within a single vessel, but the result isn't peace, it's tension. Sazed constantly struggles to balance two intents that were never meant to coexist. The Iriali may have come to observe what happens when Investiture is reassembled, but without resolution. Scadrial would demonstrate that putting the pieces back together is not the same as restoring what was lost. Hemalurgy in particular may have offered a warning. It allows for Investiture to be moved between people, but it always creates holes, realmatic wounds that cannot fully heal. This may have symbolized the dangers of forcibly unifying fragmented elements without understanding their deeper nature. In that sense, Scadrial could represent a turning point of the trail, not only examining what power looks like in decay, but what it becomes when recombined with mixed results. Lumar is a planet featured in Tress of the Emerald Sea. It is characterized by a highly unusual and highly dangerous environmental system involving 12 moons, each associated with a distinct spore type. These spores react violently or creatively when exposed to water, resulting in effects such as instant vine regrowth, stone formation, or explosive combustion. The underlying mechanism for this magic is not tied to a shard, but rather to aethers, an ancient form of investiture that predates the shattering of Adenalsium. Unlike most shard-based systems, aether-based magic is biological in nature. The spores behave more like living agents than intent-driven magic. They don't rely on connection to a vessel, nor do they require spoken commands, symbols, or oaths. Lumar also lacks an overtly active shard. There is no known vessel operating or investing in the planet. Its investiture system appears self-sustaining and possibly curated or maintained by unknown forces. Lumar offers a radical contrast to every world the Iriali may have visited before. This is not a planet shaped by active divine control or a damaged shard. It's a world where investiture behaves independently of divine intention. The aether spores respond to natural inputs rather than spiritual ones. They represent a system of investiture without governance. No oaths, glyphs, or moral gatekeeping. For the Iriali, this may have served as a study of investiture in its raw, unaligned state, a world where magic continues not because someone holds the shard, but because the system functions on its own. That said, Lumar isn't neutral, it's curated. The moons, the patterns, the specific reactions of each spore type suggest design, not randomness. And while the aethers form bonds with people, they do not seem to teach, transform, or guide. The Iriali may have found this unsettling. Lumar could have demonstrated a power without shard can persist, but it lacks something fundamental, perhaps adaptability, perhaps growth. After studying so many broken systems, Lumar may have seemed like an artificial conclusion, a system that works but does not evolve. And so they would move on. One final step remains. Vax is one of the most mysterious names in the Cosmere. It's referenced only a handful of times by Ruin in Mistborn Secret History and by Chris in Arcanum Unbounded, where she admits that The planet or system is real but poorly understood. We know almost nothing about Vax's geography, investiture, or people. We don't know if it has a shard. We don't know what its magic system looks like, but we do know it has realmatic relevance. Vax is mentioned in contexts involving spiritual transition and cognitive travel, and it's speculated to involve unique interactions between realms or even the spiritual self. That alone makes it an important candidate for the end of a journey like the Iriali's. If the Iriali are following a realmatic trail across fragmented investiture systems, then Vax, precisely because it is unknown, might be the final step. Unlike the other lands, Vax doesn't offer a new form of power to study. Instead, it may represent the transition out of the pattern they have been tracing, a place that doesn't illustrate fragmentation or stability, but something beyond both. If Yolan marked the origin point, where the one was first broken, then Vax could represent a threshold, the boundary where all learned experience collapses into something new. Not unity, but transcendence, or possibly integration. Vax might not even be a planet in the conventional sense. It could be a point of realmatic transformation, a place where identity and connection change in a way that can't be tracked across maps. For the Iriali, reaching Vax might mean the end not of their people, but of their separateness, a return to the one, not through reunion, but through conclusion. The Iriali claim that they will walk through 7 lands before they become one again. That idea can be interpreted in many ways, philosophically, spiritually, or metaphorically. Viewing the Long Trail as a literal journey through the Cosmere, a new pattern emerges, a study in investiture. From Yolan, the original state of Adenalsium, to Sel, where divine power was shattered and left unclaimed, Threnody, haunted by the echoes of a wounded shard, Roshar, where investiture flows richly under the influence of multiple shards, Scadrial, where 2 shards were merged but not reconciled, Lumar, where investiture behaves biologically and without guidance, and finally Vax, a world we know nothing about, possibly because it's not a world at all, but with a realmatic endpoint. If the Iriali are tracking how power changes in the absence of wholeness, each step of the trail teaches a different lesson. Some show chaos, others show structure. Some offer no guidance at all. But taken together, they form a sequence, one that reflects different modes of investiture failure, persistence, or transformation. We may never know the full truth of the trail, and we may never meet the Iriali again, but the pattern they leave behind is worth noticing, because while most people in the Cosmere see power or survival, the Iriali seem to be asking a different question. What broke? And what, if anything, can be learned from the fragments?